Imagine risking everything to save a stranger's life, a decision that could change your destiny forever. What would you do if the weight of your family's future rested on your shoulders? Dive into this gripping story of courage, resilience, and the power of unexpected kindness. Don't miss the journey that proves even the smallest actions can spark the biggest changes. If you believe in standing up for what's right, like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories. The Williams family lived in a small, decaying house on the outskirts of the city. The peeling paint and broken windows of their home mirrored the struggles they faced daily. Jacob, the father, had once been the pillar of the family, working tirelessly at a respected company. But everything changed when he uncovered corruption among his supervisors. Speaking out had cost him his job. He was fired without warning, and soon after, his reputation was smeared, making it impossible for him to find new employment. The betrayal weighed heavily on him, leading him into a deep depression. He spent most of his days sitting on the worn-out couch, staring blankly at the television, unable to muster the energy to even look for work. His guilt consumed him, and he avoided meeting the eyes of his family. Martha, his wife, did everything she could to keep the family afloat. She worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices in the morning and washing dishes at a small cafe at night. Her hands were always raw from cleaning, her back aching from the constant strain. No matter how hard she worked, there was never enough. Bills piled up on the kitchen counter, and eviction notices were taped to the door. She tried to shield her children from the worst of it, but her exhaustion showed in the lines on her face and the tremor in her voice when she spoke to them. Their son, Jamal, only 14, felt the burden of their struggles as deeply as his parents. He was mature beyond his years, forced to grow up too quickly under the weight of poverty. After school, he worked at a local auto repair shop, doing odd jobs and helping the mechanics fix cars. His pay was meager, but every cent he earned went to his mother to help buy food or pay down their rent. Jamal dreamed of becoming an engineer one day. Every night, when the house grew quiet, he would sit on the floor of the small room he shared with his younger sister, Kayla, and draw diagrams of machines in an old notebook. He imagined inventions that could make life easier for people like his parents, but his dreams felt distant and unreachable. Kayla, Jamal's 8-year-old sister, was a cheerful and optimistic child despite the challenges her family faced. She clung to her brother, idolizing him as her hero. Kayla often told Jamal that one day everything would get better, even though she didn't fully understand the depth of their problems. Her innocence and unwavering belief in him were the only things that brought a smile to his face after long, grueling days at the repair shop. One evening, as the family sat around the kitchen table eating a meager dinner of rice and beans, the weight of their situation felt heavier than ever. The house was silent except for the sound of Kayla humming softly to herself. Jacob stared at his plate, unable to bring himself to eat. Martha glanced at him, her lips pressed into a thin line, before turning her attention to Jamal. "Jamal, how was work today?" she asked, forcing a smile. "It was fine," he replied, though his voice lacked enthusiasm. He didn't want to tell her about the rude customer who had refused to pay him after he worked for hours fixing her car. The woman had muttered something under her breath about kids like him not being trustworthy. Jamal had swallowed his anger, knowing he couldn't afford to lose the job. Martha nodded, her smile fading as she looked at the eviction notice taped to the fridge. The landlord had given them 2 weeks to pay the overdue rent, or they would be thrown out. She didn't know how they would manage it. Her hands trembled as she reached for her glass of water. "We'll figure something out," she said, more to herself than to anyone else. Jacob finally spoke, his voice low and filled with regret. "I'm sorry," he muttered, not lifting his gaze. "I should have kept quiet at work. I should have—" "No," Martha interrupted firmly. "You did the right thing, Jacob. What happened wasn't your fault. But it's because of me that we're in this mess," he insisted, his hands balling into fists on the table. "It's not your fault, Dad," Jamal said quietly. He looked at his father, seeing the man he had once admired so much reduced to this broken state. "We're a family. We'll get through this together." Jacob didn't respond, but his eyes glistened with unshed tears. The room fell into silence again. After dinner, Jamal sat in his room with Kayla, drawing in his notebook by the dim light of a desk lamp. Kayla leaned over his shoulder, watching him sketch a diagram for a solar-powered generator. "Is that another one of your inventions?" she asked. "Yeah," Jamal replied, his voice soft. "It's just an idea." Kayla smiled. "You're going to build it one day, right?" "Maybe," he said, though doubt weighed heavily in his mind. "You will," Kayla said confidently. "You're the smartest person I know." Her faith in him warmed his heart, but it also made him feel the weight of his family's struggles even more. That night, as he lay in bed, staring at the cracks in the ceiling, he thought about their situation. He thought about his mother's tired eyes, his father's silence, and the eviction notice on the fridge. "I have to do something," he thought. "I can't just watch my family fall apart." The next morning, he woke up early and got ready for school. As he packed his worn backpack, he made a silent promise to himself. He would find a way to change their situation. No matter what it took, he wouldn't let his family lose hope. Jamal finished his work at the auto shop later than usual that evening. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, leaving the streets dimly lit by flickering streetlights. He wiped his hands on a dirty rag, the smell of oil and grease clinging to his clothes as he packed up his tools. The evening air was cool, and his breath came out in faint puffs as he started his walk home along the familiar path by the river. The sound of rushing water filled the air, a constant backdrop to his thoughts. He couldn't stop thinking about the eviction notice taped to the fridge. 2 weeks. That was all they had. As he walked, the faint hum of an approaching car caught his attention. He glanced over his shoulder and saw the bright headlights of a sleek luxury car speeding down the narrow road by the riverbank. The car swerved slightly, as if the driver was struggling to control it. Jamal froze in place, watching in alarm as the car veered off course, plowed through the metal railing, and plunged into the river with a deafening crash. For a moment, Jamal stood paralyzed, his heart pounding in his chest. The sound of rushing water and the faint hiss of the car's engine filled the air. He could see the vehicle sinking rapidly, its rear end still above the water as the front disappeared beneath the surface. A small crowd began to gather on the riverbank, their voices rising in panic and confusion. "Someone call 911, a woman shouted, clutching her phone. "The car's going under." "Is anyone in there?" a man asked, though he made no move to approach the water. Jamal stepped closer, his eyes locked on the sinking car. Through the windshield, he could see the faint outline of a figure, a woman trapped in the driver's seat. She was pounding weakly on the window, her movements growing slower as water began to fill the car. The crowd on the riverbank did nothing but shout and point. No one dared to act. "It's too dangerous," someone yelled. "The car might explode." Jamal's hands clenched into fists. He couldn't just stand there and watch. His mother's words echoed in his mind. You have to do what's right, even if it's hard. He dropped his backpack to the ground, kicked off his shoes, and sprinted toward the water. Kid, stop! A man from the crowd shouted. You'll get yourself killed. But Jamal didn't stop. The cold water hit him like a shock, stealing his breath as he dove in. The current was stronger than he expected, pulling at him as he swam toward the car. His arms and legs burned with effort, but he pushed forward, his determination outweighing his fear. When he reached the car, it was almost fully submerged. He could see the woman inside more clearly now. Her long brown hair floated around her face, and her movements were sluggish, her strength fading. Jamal grabbed a large rock from the riverbed and used it to smash the driver's side window. The glass shattered, and water rushed in, nearly knocking him backward. Hang on, he shouted, though he wasn't sure if she could hear him. He reached through the broken window, cut in his arms on the jagged glass, and unbuckled her seatbelt. She was heavier than he expected, and the angle made it difficult to pull her out. But he didn't give up. Inch by inch, he dragged her through the window and into the water. By the time Jamal surfaced, his lungs were burning and his muscles felt like they were on fire. The woman was unconscious, her head resting limply against his shoulder. He kicked his legs furiously, fighting the current as he made his way back to shore. The crowd on the riverbank erupted into cheers and applause as Jamal stumbled out of the water, dragging the woman onto the muddy ground. She's not breathing, someone yelled. Does anyone know CPR? Jamal dropped to his knees beside her, his hands trembling as he pressed them against her chest. He had learned basic CPR in school, and though his mind was racing, he forced himself to focus. He counted out compressions, pausing only to tilt her head back and blow air into her lungs. After what felt like an eternity, the woman coughed, water spilling from her mouth as she gasped for air. She's alive, someone shouted. Jamal sagged back onto the ground, his chest heaving as relief washed over him. He barely noticed the flashing lights of an ambulance and police cars as they arrived. Paramedics rushed to the woman's side, carefully lifting her onto a stretcher. One of them turned to Jamal, his eyes wide with disbelief. You saved her, the paramedic said. Kid, that was incredible. You could have been killed. I couldn't just stand there, Jamal replied, his voice hoarse. She needed help. The woman, still weak but conscious, reached out a trembling hand toward Jamal. Her piercing green eyes locked onto his, and she managed a faint smile. Thank you, she whispered, her voice barely audible. You saved my life. Jamal nodded, too exhausted to respond. He watched as the paramedics loaded her into the ambulance and drove away, the sound of the siren fading into the distance. The crowd began to disperse, but a few people lingered, murmuring about the bravery of the boy who had risked his life to save a stranger. By the time Jamal retrieved his backpack and shoes, his hands and arms were covered in shallow cuts, and his clothes were soaked through. He walked home in silence, the events of the evening replaying in his mind. He didn't know who the woman was or what would happen next, but one thing was clear. His life was about to change in ways he couldn't begin to imagine. The next morning, Jamal woke up feeling every muscle in his body ache. His arms were sore from pulling the woman out of the car, and the cuts on his hands stung as he tried to bandage them with the supplies his mother had found in an old first aid kit. He hadn't told her the full story yet, only that he had gotten hurt while working late. He didn't want her to worry more than she already did. She had enough on her plate. After quickly eating a piece of dried toast for breakfast, Jamal grabbed his backpack and headed out to the auto shop, unsure of what the day would bring. He had barely started his shift when a sleek black SUV pulled up outside the shop. It was the kind of car Jamal had only seen in magazines. Shiny, spotless, and far too expensive for anyone in his neighborhood to own. The driver, a serious-looking man in a tailored suit, stepped out and opened the passenger door. Jamal's heart skipped a beat as the woman he had rescued stepped out of the car. She looked completely different from the night before. Gone were the wet clothes and desperate expression. Now she was dressed in an elegant white blouse and dark slacks, her hair neatly pulled back. Despite the bandage on her forehead, she carried herself with an air of confidence and poise. Jamal froze, unsure of what to do as she approached him. His boss, a gruff man named Mr. Coleman, looked up from under the hood of a car and raised an eyebrow. "You know her, kid?" he asked. I think so," Jamal stammered. The woman smiled warmly and extended her hand. "Jamal Williams, right?" she said, her voice soft but commanding. "I've been looking for you. My name is Angela Jones." Angela Jones. Jamal's eyes widened in recognition. He'd heard that name before. She was a famous actress, the kind who starred in blockbuster movies and graced the covers of magazines. He had seen her face on billboards and TV commercials, but he never imagined he'd meet her in person, let alone save her life. "I just wanted to thank you properly," Angela continued, her smile unwavering. "If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be standing here today. You risked your life for me, and I'll never forget that." Jamal felt his cheeks heat up as the mechanics in the shop stopped what they were doing to watch the exchange. He shuffled his feet awkwardly, unsure of how to respond. I couldn't let you drown," he said finally. "I didn't really think about it." "That's what makes what you did so incredible," Angela said, her green eyes locking onto his. "You acted selflessly, without hesitation. That kind of bravery is rare." Jamal glanced down at his feet, still feeling out of place in her presence. "I'm just glad you're okay," he muttered. Angela's smile softened. "More than okay, thanks to you. But I also heard a little bit about you from some of the people at the river. They told me you work here to help your family. Is that true?" Jamal hesitated, unsure of how much to share. "Yeah," he admitted. "Things have been tough. My dad lost his job and my mom's doing her best, but it's not enough. I try to help out where I can." Angela's expression grew serious. "That's a lot of responsibility for someone your age. You're remarkable, Jamal, and I want to help." Jamal blinked in surprise. "Help? How?" Angela turned to the man in the suit, who handed her a sleek black folder. She opened it and pulled out a stack of papers. "First, I'm going to make sure your family has a roof over their heads. I've already contacted your landlord and I'll be covering your back rent. You won't have to worry about eviction anymore." Jamal's eyes widened. You're serious?" "Completely," Angela said firmly. "But that's just the beginning. I've also arranged for your father to see a specialist for whatever treatment or therapy he needs to get back on his feet. And your mother, well, I have some connections in the nonprofit world. I think we can find her a job that pays better and gives her the stability she deserves." Jamal stared at her, unable to process what he was hearing. It sounded too good to be true. "Why would you do all that for us?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Angela's gaze softened, and for a moment she seemed to let down the guarded exterior she wore so well. "Because you saved my life," she said simply, "and because I believe in paying kindness forward. You've shown so much strength and courage, Jamal. The least I can do is make sure you and your family have the opportunities you deserve." Before Jamal could respond, Mr. Coleman cleared his throat from behind him. "Kid," he said gruffly, though there was a glint of admiration in his eyes, "go with her. I'll cover your shift today." Jamal hesitated, but, "No buts," Mr. Coleman said. "You've earned this." Angela smiled and gestured toward the SUV. "Shall we?" Jamal nodded, still feeling dazed, and followed her to the car. As they drove, Angela asked him questions about his life, his family, and his dreams. At first, Jamal was hesitant to share too much, but Angela's genuine interest and warmth put him at ease. He told her about his love for science and engineering, how he spent his nights sketching ideas for inventions in his notebook, and how he hoped to one day build something that could make a real difference in the world. Angela listened intently, nodding thoughtfully. "You remind me of someone I knew growing up," she said. "They had big dreams, too. And you know what? They made them come true." Jamal glanced at her, unsure if she was just being polite, but there was something in her tone that made him believe she meant every word. By the time they reached his house, Jamal felt a strange mix of hope and uncertainty. Angela stepped out of the car and handed him a small business card with her personal contact information. "This is just the beginning," she said. "I'm going to make sure you and your family get the fresh start you deserve. But if you ever need anything at all, you call me, okay?" Jamal nodded, clutching the card tightly. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Angela smiled. "You don't need to thank me. You've already done more than enough. Now it's my turn to help." As the SUV pulled away, Jamal stood on the porch of his house, staring at the card in his hand. For the first time in a long time, he felt something he hadn't dared to feel in months. Hope. Jamal's first day back at school after everything that had happened was nothing like he had imagined. From the moment he walked through the front gates, it felt like all eyes were on him. Whispers followed him down the hallway, and he caught bits and pieces of conversations. "That's the kid who saved Angela Jones. Is it true she's paying for his family's rent? He's famous now." Jamal kept his head down, gripping the strap of his backpack tightly. He had never liked being the center of attention, and now it seemed impossible to avoid. In his first class, his teacher, Mr. Reynolds, called him to the front of the room. "Jamal," he said, smiling warmly, "I think everyone here has heard about what you did. Saving someone's life is no small thing, and I want you to know how proud we all are of you." The class erupted into applause, and Jamal's cheeks burned with embarrassment. He mumbled a quiet thank you before hurrying back to his seat, wishing the ground would swallow him whole. As the day went on, the attention didn't let up. Some of his classmates congratulated him sincerely, but others made snide comments or gave him looks that made it clear they weren't impressed. "Must be nice to have a celebrity take care of everything for you," one boy muttered as Jamal passed by in the hallway. Jamal clenched his fists but kept walking, refusing to let the negativity get to him. At lunch, Jamal found a quiet corner in the library to eat alone. He pulled out his notebook, the one where he sketched all his ideas, and tried to lose himself in his work. He had started designing a new project, a solar-powered charger that could be affordable and easy to use for families like his. The idea had come to him late one night, and he couldn't stop thinking about it. As he sketched, the stress of the day began to fade, replaced by the familiar excitement of creating something new. "Is that one of your inventions?" a voice interrupted. Jamal looked up to see Mr. Reynolds standing nearby, holding a stack of books. The teacher smiled and sat down across from him. I've seen you scribbling in that notebook before. What are you working on?" Jamal hesitated, then turned the notebook around to show him. "It's a portable charger," he explained. "It runs on solar power, so people who can't afford to keep buying batteries or charging devices can still use it." Mr. Reynolds studied the sketch, his expression thoughtful. "This is impressive, Jamal. Have you thought about entering it into a competition?" "A competition?" Jamal echoed, frowning. "I don't know. I've never done anything like that before." "There's a statewide science and engineering competition coming up," Mr. Reynolds said, pulling a flyer from his bag and sliding it across the table. "You'd have to finish the prototype by the deadline, but I think you have a real shot at winning. The top prize is a scholarship, and there's a lot of recognition that comes with it. This could be a big opportunity for you." Jamal stared at the flyer, his heart racing. A scholarship? Recognition? The idea both thrilled and terrified him. "What if I'm not good enough?" he asked quietly. "What if I mess up?" Mr. Reynolds smiled reassuringly. "You've already proven you're capable of incredible things, Jamal. Saving someone's life takes courage and quick thinking, qualities that will serve you well in any challenge. If you're willing to put in the work, I believe you can do this." Jamal nodded slowly, the seed of determination beginning to take root. "I'll think about it," he said. Over the next few days, Jamal threw himself into the project with everything he had. After school, he worked on the prototype in the small corner of the living room he had claimed as his workshop. Angela had sent over a set of tools and materials after hearing about his interest in engineering, and Jamal was determined not to waste the opportunity. His sister, Kayla, often sat nearby, watching him work and asking endless questions. "What's that part for?" she asked one evening, pointing to a small circuit board. "It's for the solar panel," Jamal explained, carefully soldering a wire in place. "It connects to the battery and stores the energy from the sun." Kayla's eyes lit up with wonder. "That's so cool. When you finish it, can I try it out?" Jamal chuckled. "You'll be the first to test it." Their parents watched from the kitchen where Martha was preparing dinner. "He's so focused," she whispered to Jacob, a mix of pride and amazement in her voice. "I haven't seen him this excited about something in a long time." "He's got a gift," Jacob replied, leaning against the counter, "and he's finally getting the chance to use it." As the deadline for the competition approached, Jamal's nerves began to build. He stayed up late most nights, tweaking the design and running tests to make sure everything worked perfectly. Angela stopped by the house one evening to check on his progress. She sat with him at the dining table, watching as he explained the project in detail. "You're going to do great, Jamal," she said, her confidence in him unwavering. "Just remember, this isn't about winning or losing. It's about showing the world what you're capable of." When the day of the competition finally arrived, Jamal felt a mixture of excitement and dread. The event was held in a large convention center filled with booths showcasing projects from students across the state. As Jamal set up his display, he couldn't help but feel out of place. Most of the other participants were older and had expensive-looking equipment. His solar charger, built with simple materials and a lot of determination, looked almost laughably small in comparison. But when the judges arrived at his booth, something unexpected happened. They listened intently as Jamal explained his project, asking questions about the design and its potential applications. One of them, a middle-aged woman with a kind smile, said, "This could make a real difference for people in underserved communities. You've thought this through very carefully." Jamal's confidence grew with each question he answered. By the time the judges moved on, he felt a sense of pride he hadn't experienced before. He had done his best, and that was enough. When the winners were announced at the end of the day, Jamal's heart pounded as he waited for the results. And the first place prize goes to Jamal Williams for his solar-powered portable charger. The crowd erupted into applause as Jamal's name was called. He stood frozen for a moment, hardly believing what he had heard. Then, with a nudge from Angela, who had come to support him, he stepped forward to accept the award. The judges handed him a trophy and a certificate for a full scholarship to the college of his choice. As Jamal stood on the stage, holding the trophy, he looked out at the cheering crowd and saw his family beaming with pride. In that moment, he realized that everything he had worked for, the late nights, the doubts, the struggles, had been worth it. For the first time, he saw a future filled with possibility and hope. The day the Williams family moved into their new home was one that none of them would ever forget. The house stood tall and proud at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, its fresh white paint gleaming in the sunlight. The front yard was lush with green grass, a stark contrast to the barren patch of dirt in front of their old rental. A small group of neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, curious about the new family moving in, but none as excited as the Williams themselves. The house felt like a dream, a tangible reminder of how far they had come. Jamal stood on the front porch, holding the keys Angela had handed him with a warm smile. His mother, Martha, was beside him, tears glistening in her eyes. Jacob, still moving cautiously with his recovering shoulder, stood just behind them, his expression a mix of pride and disbelief. Kayla bounced on her toes, clutching a stuffed toy and chattering excitedly about which room she would pick. Jamal unlocked the door and stepped inside, his breath catching at the sight before him. The living room was spacious and filled with light from the large windows. The walls were painted a soft cream, and there was new furniture, a comfortable couch, a coffee table, and even a television that looked far more modern than the one they had left behind. The kitchen, visible from the entryway, gleamed with stainless steel appliances and polished countertops. It was a kitchen where his mother could cook with ease, without feeling cramped or exhausted by the outdated equipment she had struggled with for years. Kayla darted up the stairs, her laughter echoing through the house as she explored. "Mom! Dad! My room has a pink wall," she shouted, "and stars on the ceiling. It's so cool." Her voice was filled with pure joy, a sound that warmed Jamal's heart. Martha ran her fingers over the edge of the dining table, a beautiful wooden piece large enough to seat the whole family. She looked at Jacob, shaking her head in disbelief. "I never thought we'd have something like this," she whispered. "It's perfect." Jacob, still adjusting to the change, nodded slowly. "We've been through so much, but maybe this is our chance to start over. Maybe this is where everything gets better." Jamal's room was just as incredible as the rest of the house. A sturdy desk sat by the window, stocked with supplies for his inventions. A set of shelves held tools, books on engineering, and even a small model of a solar panel that Angela had gifted him after the competition. The walls were painted a calming blue, and there was a bulletin board where he could pin his sketches and ideas. As he ran his fingers over the surface of the desk, Jamal felt a sense of pride and determination. This was his space, a place where he could dream and create without limits. The first night in their new home was magical. Angela had arranged for groceries to be delivered earlier in the day, and Martha had cooked a full meal: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans. The family sat around the dining table, laughing and talking as they ate. Kayla couldn't stop grinning, and even Jacob, who had been so weighed down by guilt and despair for months, cracked a joke that made everyone laugh. After dinner, they gathered in the living room to watch a movie on their new television. Jamal sat on the couch with Kayla leaning against him, her head resting on his shoulder. Martha and Jacob sat side by side, their hands intertwined. It was a simple moment, but it was one they had longed for, a moment of peace and togetherness without the looming shadow of struggle hanging over them. Over the next few weeks, the family settled into their new life. Martha started her new job at the nonprofit organization Angela had connected her with. For the first time, she was working in a role where she felt valued and respected. She came home each evening with a lightness in her step, excited to tell her family about the people she was helping. The job paid well, and it gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Jacob, too, found a new sense of fulfillment. While he was still recovering from his shoulder injury, Angela had arranged for him to work as a mentor for at-risk youth at the same nonprofit where Martha worked. Sharing his story of resilience and perseverance with the teenagers gave him a renewed sense of self-worth. He quickly became a trusted figure, someone the kids could rely on for guidance and support. One evening, as he sat on the porch with Martha, he reflected on how far they had come. "I never thought I'd be able to give back like this," he said. "But helping these kids, it feels like everything we went through wasn't for nothing." Martha nodded, her eyes shining with pride. "You've always had so much to give, Jacob. It's just taken some time to find the right way to share it." Jamal, meanwhile, threw himself into his studies and his inventions. Winning the competition had given him a confidence he had never felt before. His teachers continued to support and encourage him, especially Mr. Reynolds, who became a mentor and sounding board for Jamal's ideas. With Angela's help, Jamal even started working on a plan to develop his solar-powered charger into a product that could be mass-produced and distributed to low-income communities. The idea that his work could make a real difference in people's lives filled him with a sense of purpose and excitement. Kayla thrived in their new home as well. She made friends in the neighborhood, inviting them over for play dates and sleepovers. Her laughter filled the house, a constant reminder of how far they had come. One afternoon, as she played in the backyard with her friends, Jamal watched from his bedroom window, smiling at the sight. For the first time in years, their family felt whole. Angela remained a constant presence in their lives, stopping by regularly to check in and offer support. One evening, she joined them for dinner, sitting at their dining table and laughing along with their stories. Afterward, she and Jamal sat on the porch, looking out at the quiet street. "You've come a long way, Jamal," Angela said, her voice filled with warmth. "I hope you're proud of yourself." Jamal nodded, his gaze steady. "I am, but I couldn't have done it without you." Angela smiled. "Maybe, but you were the one who took the first step. You saw someone in need and acted without hesitation. That's the kind of person who changes the world." Jamal thought about her words as he sat there, the cool evening air brushing against his face. He knew there was still a long road ahead, but for the first time he felt ready to face it. The struggles of the past hadn't broken him. They had shaped him into someone stronger, someone who could overcome anything. And as he looked at his family, laughing together inside the house that was now their home, Jamal knew that their best days were still ahead. Life for the Williams family transformed in ways they could never have imagined. The house became not just a shelter, but a sanctuary filled with warmth, laughter, and dreams that finally felt attainable. For the first time, their future didn't feel like an uphill battle. Every member of the family began to thrive in their own way, the dark clouds of their past slowly lifting as they embraced the opportunities that had come their way. But with change came new challenges and responsibilities, and Jamal found himself facing decisions that would shape not only his life, but the lives of those around him. Jamal's invention, the solar-powered charger, gained attention far beyond the competition he had entered. After his story appeared in local news articles and spread online, several companies reached out to him, offering partnerships to develop the product further. One evening, as Jamal sat at his desk working on a more advanced prototype, his phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from a major tech company based in Silicon Valley. They wanted to meet with him to discuss funding and mass production. Jamal's heart raced as he read the email, but a knot of uncertainty formed in his stomach. He was only 14. What did he know about business meetings or partnerships? The thought of stepping into a world he didn't fully understand was daunting. He decided to talk to Angela about it the next day. Angela listened carefully as Jamal explained the situation, her expression thoughtful. They were sitting on the back porch, the evening air cool and quiet around them. "It's a big opportunity, Jamal," she said, her tone encouraging, "but it's also a big responsibility. You'll need guidance to navigate something like this, and I'd be happy to help you." Jamal hesitated, fidgeting with the hem of his hoodie. "What if I mess it up? What if they don't take me seriously because I'm just a kid?" Angela smiled gently. "You're not just a kid. You're someone with a vision and the courage to pursue it. That's something even adults struggle with. And as for making mistakes, that's part of the process. No one gets everything right the first time. What matters is that you try." Her words gave Jamal a sense of reassurance, and he decided to accept the company's invitation. Angela helped him prepare for the meeting, teaching him how to present his ideas clearly and confidently. On the day of the meeting, she accompanied him to the company's office, a sleek building with glass walls and a view of the city skyline. The meeting was nerve-wracking at first. The room was filled with professionals in suits, their expressions serious as Jamal explained his invention and its potential impact. But as he spoke, he began to relax, focusing on his passion for the project and the difference it could make for families like his own. By the end of the presentation, the room was filled with nods and murmurs of approval. One of the executives, a tall man with glasses, leaned forward and said, "Your idea is brilliant, Jamal. It's practical, innovative, and addresses a real need. We'd like to offer you funding to develop this product on a larger scale, and we'll provide you with a team of engineers and designers to help bring your vision to life." Jamal could hardly believe what he was hearing. He glanced at Angela, who gave him an encouraging nod. "Thank you," he said, his voice steady despite the excitement bubbling inside him. "I'm ready to work hard and make this happen." As the weeks went by, Jamal found himself juggling school, family, and his growing role in the development of his invention. The tech company set up a workshop for him, where he worked with a team of professionals who respected his ideas and treated him as an equal. It was a steep learning curve, but Jamal thrived, absorbing knowledge like a sponge and applying it to improve his designs. At home, the family continued to adjust to their new life. Martha excelled in her job at the nonprofit, earning praise from her colleagues and making a tangible impact on the community. Jacob's role as a mentor grew into something he deeply cherished. He often came home with stories about the kids he was working with, his face lighting up as he talked about their progress. Kayla became the unofficial cheerleader of the family, always bringing her boundless energy and optimism to every situation. She often sat in Jamal's workshop drawing pictures of her own inventions and telling him about her plans to become an astronaut someday. Her confidence and enthusiasm reminded Jamal why he worked so hard. He wanted to set an example for her, to show her that anything was possible with determination and support. The turning point came one evening when Angela invited the Williams family to a gala event hosted by the tech company. The event was a celebration of innovation and featured speakers from various industries. Jamal was one of the guests of honor, and he was expected to give a short speech about his journey and the development of his invention. As they arrived at the event, Jamal felt a wave of nervousness. The room was filled with influential people, all dressed in elegant attire, their conversations buzzing with words he didn't fully understand. But when Angela placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, he took a deep breath and reminded himself why he was there. When it was his turn to speak, Jamal stepped onto the stage, his heart pounding in his chest. He glanced at the audience, spotting his family in the front row. Kayla waved enthusiastically, and his parents smiled with pride. Taking a deep breath, Jamal began to speak. "I never thought I'd be standing here," he said, his voice steady despite his nerves. "A year ago, my family was struggling just to get by. I worked at an auto shop after school, and I never imagined that my love for building things would lead to something like this. But one day, everything changed. I saw someone in need and decided to act even though I was scared. That decision didn't just save a life, it changed mine." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the room. "I've learned that it doesn't matter how old you are or where you come from. What matters is what you do when you see an opportunity to make a difference. My invention started as a way to help families like mine, and now, with the support of so many amazing people, it's becoming something bigger than I ever imagined. I'm grateful for this opportunity, and I promise to keep working hard to make a difference." The room erupted into applause as Jamal finished his speech. He stepped off the stage feeling a mix of relief and pride. His family greeted him with hugs, and Angela gave him a smile that said, "I knew you could do it." That night, as they drove home, Jamal looked out the window at the city lights. He thought about how far they had come and how much further he wanted to go. The struggles his family had faced hadn't defined them. They had shaped them into people who could overcome anything. And as Jamal looked at his parents and sister, he realized that this was just the beginning. The future was bright, and he was ready to face it head-on. Their story wasn't just about survival. It was about resilience, kindness, and the power of believing in yourself and others. Jamal knew there would be more challenges ahead, but with his family by his side and the opportunities he had worked so hard for, he felt ready to take on the world. Thank you for watching this incredible story of courage and resilience. What would you have done in this situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective. If this story inspired you, give it a like and help us spread the message. Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful and emotional stories that make a difference. Together, we can keep inspiring change.